We're going to start with this question you might have heard a lot more when you were younger. What do you want to be when you grow up? It's a question that I find quite relevant. I found it very relevant when I was a child, in my teens, in my 20s, in my 30s. And so, all of you are here today because there is something simmering in your minds about what it is that you really want to pursue in your career journey. So if everyone can take just a couple minutes and, think long and hard, what is it at this point in your career journey that you feel should define maybe the next 5 to 10 years? And as you're thinking about that, Ashray is going to share a prompt. He's going to put it in the chat window. Ashray, if you can, yeah. If everyone can click on that link, it's a link to a quick poll. So I'm going to request everyone to hop over to the chat window, click on the link. Ashray, if you want to show everyone the question prompt. What are the top 3 things you're looking for in your ideal or dream professional journey, right? What are the 3 elements that come to mind that you feel should really define the next 5 to 10 years of your career journey? Yeah. And we're going to show the word cloud that emerges. And this is just, again, to get a sense of what are the aspirations that we're all coming in? Are they common? Are they really different? So if folks can start filling that out, Ashray will show us what's emerging on the word cloud. Super. So if everyone can start filling out the 3 words, again, folks who are just trickling in, there is a Mentimeter link in the chat window. Go over to that link, fill out the 3 words that really define your aspirations for your ideal professional journey. I'm seeing the word impact come up. I'm seeing words like Bharat, sustainable lifestyle, work-life balance, social impact, community-driven, nation building, learning, problem solving, large-scale impact. So I think impact is showing up in many, many different ways. Impact-driven, fulfilling. Yeah. And it's interesting to see the big words in the middle: fulfilling, impact, learning, Bharat, community driven. Excellent. If you've not filled out your 3 words, please continue to do that. But I'm going to use this as a segue to just really hone in on some of the words that are showing up in the middle, right? Impact, Bharat, mentorship, fulfilling, community driven. The ACT fellowship is not going to be for someone who is looking to get rich quickly. Yeah. It's not going to be for someone who is maybe looking to be in a fast paced financial sector job. It is not a fellowship where you will be part of a huge organization running large operations, right? But if you are looking to create an impact, if you're looking to really think deeply about what is it that will help us solve larger social impact challenges like education, health, environment, gender equity, and more. If you're really mission driven and you're interested in working with other entrepreneurs who are going to build companies that solve for these challenges, then it is the right place. And I'll touch on this a lot more, but this is just to say, look, it seems like based on what folks have put in the poll, impact seems to be a common thread for many of us. Bharat seems to be a common thread for many of us. So we're in the right place, but a quick disclaimer on what the fellowship will be and won't be. Ashray, you can stop sharing your screen. I will now share mine. Okay, so let's start with, we're going to talk about 3 big sections here. We'll start with what is ACT, how we really started. We're then going to pivot to what has ACT become and what is it becoming. We are a little bit of a startup ourselves. Our birth was really exactly 2 years ago with the birth of COVID. And then we'll really spend the third part of today really deep diving into the fellowship. Like I said, I'm going to call on people. So what is ACT? Can I get folks to either raise their hands? And again, this isn't a test, but would love to hear from folks who are on the call. What have you heard about ACT? What was the genesis of ACT? What is the kind of information you all are already coming in with? So feel free to use the raise hand. Yeah, and Ashray will unmute folks so they can share. Else, I will just call on people. Amazing. Okay, Guru, can I ask you to unmute yourself and share? What have you heard about ACT?
It's a platform for professionals and individuals who create social impact. They can work together with organization and like-minded professionals. So I know a little bit, a surface level.
Yeah,
So this is what my understanding is.
that's very helpful. Thank you for getting us started. Hartej, you also have your hand raised. Can I ask you to unmute and share? If possible, folks, also, share your video while you're sharing. It's always good to see faces on webinars. Hi, Hartej, go for it.
Hi, Akanksha. Thanks for organizing this webinar. I actually came across ACT during the second wave of COVID. So I work with an MP's office and we are in the opposition. So we wanted to look at efforts which are looking at actually creating health infrastructure in rural areas because ours is a backward district. And ACT was one of the many organizations doing actual impact on that work, on that front. And I saw that model, which was basically bringing together non-profits, corporates together on one platform. So that was the reason why we even reached out to ACT, and that's how I've come across it.
Excellent. So you all have already touched on a few important things. You guys use words like platform. I'm seeing elements of collaborating with the public sector, private sector, and I'll speak about that a bit more. Just to get a little bit more diversity, Ananya, can I also ask you to come off mute and share and anything that you might have heard about ACT till now?
So I've read about ACT through on the website. I came across words like philanthropy, fund management, and developing like an ecosystem where like my fellow mates on the call has said that bringing in the funds and the social organization and working towards uplifting the challenges like you mentioned in health, and there was a large work done during COVID.
Yeah, super. And Shagun has also shared on the chat window. Thank you, Shagun. In brackets, she's put something very important. She says via grants. And so that's also something that I'll speak about. Great. So actually, thank you, all four of you. I think that's a great start. With that, let me touch on, what has been the journey of ACT in what we call ACT 1.0 or the first 2 years. Again, like I mentioned, COVID really was the event that triggered a lot of this. It was, a global pandemic, one that many of us were seeing for the first time in our lifetime. And so what happened quite organically in those early days was a bunch of well-intentioned, well-meaning people from the startup space, from the venture capital space in India, started coming together to say, hey, this seems like an opportunity and a challenge that could really leverage bringing well-intentioned folks, but also folks with resources, networks that can be unlocked towards solving this larger challenge. So we saw, 36 leaders who were really saying we want to lead this effort from the front. And over time, many, many organizations and people who then started getting attached, initially from the startup and the venture capital space, and eventually from across sectors, right? The public domain, the larger corporate sector, the philanthropy space, NGOs. And so really ACT became a platform. Once we put the problem statement out that, look, we want to be a platform to do something to help the country for COVID, it really started, kind of becoming very magnetic, and it started galvanizing funds, people, resources, efforts towards solving that. Very quickly, a leadership team emerged. So even from that larger group, a smaller group that said, we will take this, we will lead this charge from the front. A lot of these faces you might actually recognize, especially folks who are familiar with the ACT effort during wave 1 and 2. And to be honest, we were really fortunate. And what really did help the effort as well were folks, teams from organizations like McKinsey, BCG, KPMG, but also folks that have been deeply immersed in the sector, like Satwa and United Way and many others who came forward and said, we're going to help ACT galvanize these efforts, and we're going to really work together. Wave 1, again, we were very lucky. Given the network that these folks brought, we were able to fundraise fairly quickly. Approximately 11 million were raised in that first wave in 2020. And again, Shagun really mentioned this, but the approach to doing this work was to give grants very quickly and in a data-oriented manner. So we really used the data that was available to figure out what are the key challenges, what are the hotspots across the country, and how can folks who are doing the on-ground work, the execution work, the entrepreneurs and founders who are leading this work from the front, how can they come forth, make a proposal for grants, and how can we very quickly deploy money towards the work that they're doing. So on this page, you see that a lot of the work was done in preventative, as well as enabling long-term capacity in wave one. As we were kind of, starting to celebrate the successes of wave one, not just as ACT, but as a country, we know that, again, summer of 2021, what really hit us was wave two, which was of epic proportions. And so at ACT, again, what that helped do is galvanize an effort of an even larger size. So as you see in this, during that wave, about $60 million were raised and again deployed very quickly. In wave two, I will say that just giving grants was not enough for us. We had to really get involved much more in the execution of things as well, in the last mile delivery. And again, having that, strong support and group of startups that were by our side was really helpful, right? So folks like Zomato, Delivery, that were really actually working with the folks we were giving grants to ensure last mile delivery of things like oxygenators. We set up 106 PSA oxygen plants across the country. So in wave two, I will say that it was a little bit different. A lot of on-ground execution also happened. A few organizations were also incubated specifically for home care. We saw a great deal of potential in how technology, telemedicine could really help get a lot of the resources that were needed in the country at scale. So, not to kind of get too much into the details, but the work in waves 1 and 2, I think, were great learning experience for ACT overall. And I'll highlight 4 things that really emerged. One that really emerged especially for the startup founders that were working with us, as well as the VC folks from the venture capital of India. What we've seen in the for-profit sector over the last decade, India is now home to 100+ unicorns behind only US and China. But technology, data, innovation has been a huge catalyst for India over the last decade. And one of the themes that were emerging was when we talk about social impact, we weren't seeing as much of tech-based or data-based or product-based innovation. So one key hypothesis was, is there a way to really leverage what's happening in the for-profit world and bring some of that innovation and that thinking to the social impact space to really, again, deepen and accelerate the pace of change. The second big learning for us definitely was around collaboration, which a bunch of you mentioned already. We just felt it's so powerful when you put a problem statement out, and a problem statement that many, many people personally feel attached to, it just starts bringing people together. And we also felt that when you have a platform that sparks collaboration and collective action, things just move faster. The resources, the connections, the capacities and capabilities you have at your disposal are much larger. And so that's, again, something that's quite embedded in our DNA. Going forward, we do continue to think about how collective action can really be a way in which we work. The startup way, bias for action, again, is deeply ingrained in ACT's DNA. Failing fast, learning fast. How do we make sure, while in the impact space, we've often said change takes time. How do we start thinking about that a little bit differently? How do we really kind of operate with that startup way of working in mind? And the last, putting all of this together, was just, can we learn from the lessons learned during COVID? And how can we really apply those towards helping the most vulnerable, the most high need population in India, right? And there was a study recently that 80 to 90% of the country in India is still earning, 20 to 25,000 rupees a month. So India is a poor country, right? And it needs a lot in the next decade. And so how do we really start thinking about how to galvanize that in a collective manner, in an action-oriented startup way? So those were some of the learnings. And from that, what's shaping now, and a lot of this work has really happened over the last 6 to 7 months, now with wave 1, wave 2, Omicron behind us, we feel that, there's energy, but there's resources also for us to really shape this. So again, I'll pause. Would love for some folks to come in again and chime a little bit about what are you seeing as ACT 2.0 or ACT in the future. And again, if folks can raise their hand or put some comments in the chat window, but would love to hear, again, what folks have picked up till now. Preni, get us started, please.
So the question is, what is ACT going forward?
Correct. Yeah.
So I believe that the ACT it should go forward in such a way that it has a tremendous and very good impact on the people, especially as
Yeah.
we all know that everyone, including LGBT organization and everyone, is facing a lot of health crisis during the second wave, as the COVID itself is acting as a catalyst to the downfall. But still, as we all know, as you mentioned here, that we are growing faster, we have to learn how to be flexible enough to handle of things in this crisis. And through this learning, and as you said about data and learning, every mentorship, everything combined forward, this can make India go higher.
Yeah. Yeah. Super. So you touched on a few elements there, really Bharat orientation. How do we almost come out of just COVID, but think about the larger challenges? Shrey, do you want to come in?
Hi, first of all, thank you for this beautiful session, Akansha. I feel that one thing that Act 2.0 should focus on is the financial sustainability of the social projects. Because a lot of times we see projects dying because they are just dependent on some grant, and when the grant gets over, the project dies away. So I feel that one aspect that Act 2.2 should definitely consider while shortlisting your fellows should be the financial sustainability, the long-term financial sustainability of the projects, the social projects.
Yeah, excellent. And that is a key feature of what we think about day in and day out. Thank you, Shrey. Guru?
I think if a fellow person or a company can give a sustainable solution for the environment, healthcare, and everything, probably we have to give a chance to scale the operation globally. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be like one planet, one people. At the end of the day, everyone is a human. So if one solution is possible, practically possible, probably we need to take that solution globally. For that, we need to have a proper networking channel, people, to bring a collective social impact across the planet. So this is what my expectation.
Super. Okay, excellent, folks. So one big thing I'll highlight before I get into the slides, there are these 3 or 4 prongs that are very, very key to us in everything that we do going forward, right? And when we talk about social change, you all have already hit on some of them. Scale is very important to us, right? For a country as big as ours, we just feel that while a lot of good work is happening, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 is also not enough, right? So how do we really build innovations that are scaling to millions? At the same time, depth of impact is also really important, right? So just high-level numbers are not enough. So what we typically call impact at scale or deep impact at scale, sustainable impact at scale, I think those are very, very important criteria for the founders we look to back. And I think sustainability kind of ties into that as well, right? Creating impact at scale, but organizations that have figured out how they're going to sustain that, right? And therefore for us, not for profit, for profit doesn't matter. As long as the model is sustainable, as long as these are enduring organizations that can exist for, not just 2 or 3 years. We don't like to do project-based funding or program-based funding. These really need to be enduring institutions and innovations that are able to create sustainable quality impact at scale for many, many millions of people, but also for many, many years. So with that, what has ACT evolved into? The words I'd really like to highlight here are the top 3 terms in pink: non-profit, venture philanthropy, platform. Yeah, and I'll quickly share what that means in ACT's context, right? First and foremost, we are a grant maker, right? So while in wave 2, we did have to get into the thick of things, we are always going to be a small institution. We're about 10 to 12 people strong right now. We don't see ourselves as being a large 100% execution org, right? We are not the end implementers. What we are grant makers, right? So in the for-profit world, what you call PEVC, right? Folks who kind of give the money to enable entrepreneurs to grow their ventures. So we will always be a grant maker, but we think that's a really important place to be, because as a grant maker, the partnership you have with entrepreneurs is really, really important. It can be game changing. And so where we put our funds how strategically we deploy them, the entrepreneurs we work closely with, the manner in which we collaborate with them. We think that's going to be a really important aspect of how we pave the way for some of these institutions that you all mentioned that are creating that sustainable quality impact at scale. So first and foremost, we are a grant maker. Our predominant theory of change is that we deploy funds to accelerate, incubate, and scale organizations that will create this social impact, right? The second big part of our identity is that we do want to be a collective. We don't want to do this work in silos. We think that the nation will move much faster. We think our entrepreneurs and their ventures will grow much faster if we are constantly collaborating, right? And that collaboration needs to happen with the government. It needs to happen with other foundations, philanthropies, NGOs that are doing this work on the ground. I think our entrepreneurs need to work with each other, because that's when, when 1 + 1 becomes 10. And I think over time, we'll also look to do things like incubations, accelerators, incubators, challenge grants, design challenges, capacity building programs. But we just think there's a lot of power similar to our work in COVID. When we work together, we can really deepen and accelerate the change that we're able to make. Last but not least, we are a not-for-profit company, right? And I want to make that really clear. We are not doing this work ultimately to earn returns. We are a pure Section 8 company. For us, the mission is most important. And so, what the skin in the game for us is the mission, the amount of lives being impacted. It is not a financial return that we're looking for here. Yeah. So those are 3 aspects of our identity that I want to make really clear. We have moved now from a single cause, right? So initially, ACT did stand for Action for COVID Task Force. That has now evolved. ACT is no longer a single entity, single purpose organization. Right now, there are 4 verticals that have come up. There's education, environment, health, and women. But that is not to say that more verticals will not form in the coming time, right? So what do we do? The work very much, our aspiration is that whatever the biggest challenges are ones that we think need solving. And so these verticals also will continue to evolve in time. Right now, we're 4 that might evolve in the coming decade. And again, just to give people an insight into how we're organized, right? So as an organization, there is a team at a platform level, right? This currently has our finance team. So you'll see Mugundan and Ponappa there from the finance team. You'll see Alankrita and Nahid from the branding and comms team, right? So these are folks that really help all 4 of our verticals, as well as build that platform that galvanizes collective change. Over time, we also think we might add 1 or 2 more folks to this larger platform. These will be folks that work a lot on partnerships, community building, and other efforts. Each of the 4 verticals are actually what we call mini funds. So each of them eventually will be 100 crore fund each. And how they're organized is that there is a full-time team. So for education, for example, it's Ashray and myself. And a real asset for us is the investment committee that is backing the work that we do for each of those funds, right? So for education, it's Mohit, Ashish, and Mekin. Again, just incredible people to have by our side to guide the investment decisions that we're making in the grant making work that we're doing. And you'll see that each of the ICs themselves are also a little bit of a hybrid, right? So if we're saying that we need to collaborate, we need cross-sector, cross-disciplinary work to happen, then we need to also mimic that. And so for that reason, a lot of our teams, as well as our investment committees, you'll see our folks who both bring a lot of expertise in working with, startups, VCs, but also have deep knowledge of the sector and of the challenges. And so, again, there's core ICs, but we also draw a significant amount. We work heavily with experts who bring domain expertise. Environment is a great example of that, right? Because environment has many things under it, like air, water, agriculture, and many other things. And so we just think that drawing upon experts is going to be critical. And again, that's where ACT has been quite lucky. Given our work in COVID, we've built a really strong network and community of individuals who are working with us. So similarly, there's health. There's a full-time team and an investment committee. Same with environment. Women was the 4th vertical to come up. We are looking to bring someone on very quickly, but because they're not fully on board, I've not shared their picture just yet. But ultimately, each of the funds will be full-time, about 2 to 3 full-time people, a director, a lead, and a program manager. backed with a strong investment committee. And that's where the fellows come in, which is across these 4 verticals. So as a fellow, you will be tagged to one specific vertical, and you'll really be, involved in everything end to end in what we call venture philanthropy. Very quickly, I know for some folks, this might not be new information, but for those who haven't really done a lot of grant giving, here are usually what the steps look like, right? So there's sourcing, which is when you're talking to lots and lots of entrepreneurs and founders in the space, you're trying to figure out which ones are mission aligned, which ones aren't. Sourcing is a very important part of what we do. It's to really find the innovators who are doing the work that we want to give grants to. Due diligence, again, is very important. That's where deeper conversations happen. You really start understanding what is the work that each of them is doing. Is it aligned to the kind of change we want to do or not? Decisions then ultimately, once you've kind of prepared a strong case for a founder to be backed, or an organization to be backed, they go to investment committee. That's where a decision gets made. If everyone is supportive, you will ultimately make a grant. With the grant, you'll also shape, how will that grant be deployed? What are the terms of the grant? What are the outcomes that we're really looking to hit with the grant? Post-grant, obviously, there's a lot of portfolio management. I can't stress this enough. I think working closely with the founders is incredibly important for us. Finally, monitoring and evaluation, impact measuring, making sure that the money that we've been deployed is leading to the outcomes intended. And ultimately, obviously, if all of this goes well, the larger hope for us is that over time, we'll fundraise for larger and larger funds and deploy them towards these larger causes. The grants, I will say, like I mentioned already, are not meant to be programmatic or project-based in nature. These are meant to be catalytic grants. So they're meant to be grants that can really help an organization fundamentally scale their operations or fundamentally figure out their model so that it's sustainable over time. So I think making sure that these are catalytic grants is very important. Here's an example of what the education portfolio has started shaping up as. But where the platform part of the work comes in is over time as you make grants and you start building a portfolio, you start realizing what the key challenges in that sector are. And that then leads to some of the collective initiatives, like I mentioned, right? So for example, in education, we're finding that a lot of the innovations that are being built for Bharat are being built on WhatsApp, right? Because it is a channel that has deep penetration in our country. As you're building innovations on top of WhatsApp, few common things emerged, right? There was a capacity building element that a lot of our portfolio organizations were asking for. That led to an initiative called Tech Advisors for Social Change that we launched, where we're now mapping a lot of tech talent from the private sector to work with some of our social impact entrepreneurs. It also led to actually conversations with the WhatsApp India team, right? To say, is there a way for us to strategically collaborate towards this larger mission? So these are just some examples, but ultimately, in addition to just giving those one-on-one grants, like I have iterated a few times now, working at a platform level, thinking about collaboratives that can emerge to fundamentally deepen and accelerate the pace of change is going to be really critical. So again, here are 2 examples of the work we do, both as a grant maker as well as a platform for collective. Rocket Learning is an organization that we gave a grant to. I think this was early in 2021. When they were a very new organization. What's important is we do feel that grant has been catalytic. They've moved from a 3 to 5 crore budget last year to a 12 crore budget. They've built a sustainable organization. Their impact is scheduled to hit 3 million plus students in the coming year. They're building a WhatsApp-based behavioral nudging innovation. The founders are incredible and diverse, right? So while some of the founders are your folks from IIT, have studied and have gotten their MBA from organizations like the Harvard Business School, have worked at places like BCG and McKinsey. Their founders also are folks who've really lived in tier 2, tier 3 India and have a very shared experience of what the challenges of Bharat are. So we also feel that having a diverse set of founders is going to be really important to solve some of these diverse set of challenges. But they're an example of what we feel a catalytic grant should be able to do for some of our entrepreneurs. Similarly, from the environment group, there was an initiative called the India Clean Air Challenge, which some of you might have seen, ICAC. Again, done in a very collaborative manner, various organizations that you see on the right-hand side from APAG, Nudge, Green Artha, Social Alpha. So it really was a collaborative where many folks came together to pool funds, expertise, connects with the government. But the challenge that they were seeing is there are a lot of innovations that where the tech is ready, but the sustainable model is not ready. I think Guru touched on that a little bit. So the challenge really was designed around finding some of those innovations and giving them a cohort-based support, tech facilities within the government to also pilot and test some of these to make sure they are scale ready. And from that, a good bunch of 10 to 12 innovations were found that the ICAC team is now working very closely with. Yeah, so these are again examples of what both grant making and the collective will look like. I'll again pause. Any questions so far? Any burning questions? Maybe one or two questions before we get into the fellowship. Yes, I think there's a question from Joanne.
Hey, hi, Johan.
Johan, hi.
Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation. My question had a little bit to do with how you're thinking about the problems that are trying to solve in the environment sector. Number one, because obviously the space is super vast, and everything is pretty much very intersectional to the environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So be it education, be it health, be it women, right? So that's number one. Number two, I think, is in terms of, are you only going to fund NGOs, or are you okay funding, startups as well in the space from your portfolio of grants?
Super. So I'll answer your second question first, Johan. Like I said, for us, for-profit, not-for-profit, startup, mid-stage, late stage, like those are not kind of criteria that we look for. We just feel that there needs to be strong alignment that, ultimately these are innovations that are going to scale. And like I said, we're really fundamentally trying to redefine what scale looks like, right? So we're saying that these need to be catalytic innovations. How do they get to their first 500,000, 1 million users to 5 million to 10 million, right? So I do think that that's a jarring switch in this space, because often the innovations that we've seen, very, very few have scaled to that level. Needs to be deep impact, and therefore what are the outcomes that we're measuring that showcase that. But like I said, no distinguishing on that part as long as it's mission aligned. I'm not going to touch on the verticals just yet. And if folks are curious about that, what I would recommend is reaching out to us. And we're happy to make connections. Just for the purpose of the webinar, I think getting into the individual investment thesis of each vertical will become a little bit of an overload. So if it's okay, Johan, I'm not going to touch on that just yet. Yeah. Preni, anything else? Just so I keep some of these questions in mind as I get into the fellowship as well. Go ahead, Preni.
Yes, I have a doubt. Actually, I'm quite new to this because I finished my medicine in abroad, as I know that being an LGBTQIA here in India was quite hard 10 years before. It has quite improved a lot. I just want to know, is there any experience needed to join here?
Perfect. Yeah, I will touch on that now. Okay, folks, if there are any other questions, start putting them in the chat window. That'll just allow me to make sure I'm hitting some of these. Yeah. Okay, ACT Fellowship. Some of you might have seen, a version of this on our social media account. If you've not, I'll quickly just play Karishma's very short 1-minute video. Karishma was someone who was a secondee. She worked with us for a year during the initial part. And she talks a little bit about how ACT, played into her professional journey.
Hello, I'm Karishma, an incoming MBA candidate at Harvard Business School. Prior to this, I worked as a consultant at Boston Consulting Group in the India and Dubai offices. During my time at BCG, I got the chance to work with ACT grants as part of a year-long secondment. Throughout my time at ACT, I was able to don multiple hats and contribute to many different roles. I started in the project management team initially, where I helped set up the fund from scratch, put in necessary processes in place for grant evaluation and disbursement, and made sure that things were running smoothly at a time we needed it the most. Later, I was able to contribute further to the team by undertaking grantee due diligence for ACT's healthcare and environment verticals. During this time, I was able to learn about different industries, assess many startups in the two fields, and connect with founders who had the will to bring about social change in our country. During a subsequent COVID cycle that hit India, ACT conducted a massive oxygenation drive, donating more than 30,000 oxygen concentrators across hospitals and other medical facilities in the country. I led the testing of these concentrators and supported in the tracking of these devices digitally once they were deployed. Throughout, I was also part of the core marketing and communications team, assisting fundraising and creating awareness about ACT's initiatives. ACT is a very unique organization, driven by volunteers from the VC and startup ecosystem at its helm. The ACT Fellowship offers you a chance to work with a team of professionals whose sole intention is to use their time and money for making India a better place. Here is an opportunity to make real on-ground impact for you. Take it. Apply now for ACT's 9-month fellowship.
Yeah, and Karishma, someone who even after her 1-year stint, she's kept in touch with us. You'll see a picture of a small note she sent us, but one of the things she said to us many times over is ACT has kind of really defined and almost had a huge impact in the journey that she feels will unfold for her now. So using Karishma as our inspiration really, and there were a few other folks like Karishma whose videos you can see on our social media, just to get a sense of their journey as well. But the idea, and this is where I'll also clarify a few things that have come up in the chat window. What we found is a few kind of biases that exist in the space, right? One, I think a lot of people have been thinking about the social impact space for many, many years, but are just scared, right? They don't know about it enough. There is maybe a little bit of preconceived notions around it. And so people aren't sure if this is the right career move. So there's one category that I think wants to do it, but aren't sure and are a little tentative. I think there's another category that has felt that, I don't know what the right opportunity to start is. And so in the sector, what we also see is a lot of people, do one thing for the first 30, 40, 50 years of their career, even though they've always thought about social impact. And after that, then say, okay, now let me kind of try to transition in. So what we're saying, and almost all of us full-time at ACT believe that, you don't need to wait till you're in your 50s or 60s to come into the sector. And you don't need to not come into the sector because you're scared, right? So this fellowship is really meant to be a really deep, meaningful, but 9-month opportunity for you to get that insight into the space. And I think when you're in the venture philanthropy space, it anyway gives you a big bird's eye view of everything that's happening across layers, right? From founders to on-ground execution to the way in which capital is deployed. So it's really meant to be a dedicated full-time opportunity for someone to come in, work with one vertical, and see the end-to-end cycle of what both grant making as well as building a platform for collective change looks like, right? If you are a current entrepreneur who is very clear about what you're doing and is just looking for grants, then this fellowship is not for you, right? Then I would say just get in touch with one of our verticals and apply for a grant as any other, entrepreneur would do. If you are someone who is not totally sure, in your long-term career journey, you feel that either working in the impact space or working with an NGO or working in on-ground or working in impact investing or one day starting your own organization. If some of these are things that you see maybe 1, 2, 3 years out and you just want to get that deep, intense experience, then the fellowship is for you. And so that's just one quick disclaimer that I wanted to make. It's going to be a very small cohort. Like we said, we ourselves are a small organization. We're looking for no more than 6. It is going to be incredibly selective. The skill set that we're looking for is, for whatever it's worth, quite specific. And again, a lot of this you'll see on the website. And the stipend is 50,000 per month plus reimbursements for travel. Again, this is a full-time stint, right? So if you are already gainfully employed somewhere, or if you're already running your organization as a founder, this is not for you. But if you are someone who's looking to make a full-time move, dedicate yourself to ACT for 9 months, then this is for you. Yeah. So that's just a little bit of a clarification. I want to quickly just share a bit about our team. We take a lot of pride in being a remote workplace. I think one of the things we learned from COVID is that you don't need to be fully in person all the time. We also learned that being fully remote has its disadvantages. So what a remote workplace basically means is, we have the luxury of working from our home most days of the week, but we do come together, for critical meetings, for group retreats and various other things. So on a need basis, we think the physical interactions are really critical. Small team of 12 to 14 people. I already showed you the org chart, 2 to 3 people per vertical, as well as the platform team. You'll see our values. We are a group of people who have a high bias for action. Collaboration and collective action is very much part of our DNA. Empathy and inclusivity, overcoming adversity with resilience, a huge Bharat orientation, and working with a lot of humility and honesty and saying that, look, we're a startup ourselves. We want to fail fast, because that's the only way to learn fast and accelerate our trajectory. The work is tough. If you've never done this work, let me tell you, solving the education or healthcare or environment or gender problems are not easy. There's a reason why they've not been cracked. They're non-linear. As an ex-BCG consultant myself, I can tell you, they are just, and everything is interconnected. I think Hartej touched on it. You start solving for education, you dig up something related to healthcare, environment comes up. So it's very complex. These are called wicked problems for a reason. But we're also a fun team. We do think that we need, while these problems are really challenging, we work extremely hard. We have to maintain a little bit of levity and joy. And so that's just a little bit about what the personality of our team is like. Last but not least, who are we looking for? Look, you have to be a graduate if you're still enrolled in college. Just wait for a couple years. You also need a minimum of 2 years of work experience, right? So we do feel it's important that folks who have, started their career trajectory and therefore have been able to meaningfully assess and have that conviction that this is the right move for them at this point. So we mandate at least 2 years of work experience. Given just the rigor required in terms of project management, the ability to, speak with a large network of people, so extremely strong relationship building and communication, but being able to process information very quickly. In the past, we know that folks from banking, investing, strategy consulting, high growth startup, or if you've already worked in the social impact sector, these are valuable experiences. So if you've already done some of this, we feel that you'll be very well equipped to make the transition to the fellowship. And like I said, you don't need to be an entrepreneur or an impact investor or a social impact professional already. But if this is something that you aspire to in the future, if changing the India's trajectory is something that really resonates with you, then the fellowship is for you. We can come to this in the last couple minutes, but we will pause now, folks, and would love to just get, some question and answers. Like I said, we have folks from all verticals on the call. So happy to field some questions now. Feel free to use the chat window, but also raise your hand in case you have a burning question that we can answer for you. Yeah, Utsav, I touched on some of the preconditions already. Fellowship will start in mid-September and it's a 9-month program.
I have a question.
Sorry, Preni, can you just hear from Guru quickly, or maybe a few folks we've not heard from?
Yes.
Guru, thanks, Preni.
Yeah. So we want to know how the program is scheduled. Like you said, it can be taken remotely. So it is going to be like, how many hours of work we have to be getting interact with you on day in and day out, and what is the time we have to spend in the ground. So we need to have clarification on that.
Yeah. So like I said, it's a full-time job, right? For those 9 months. So you will work, whatever the working hours for ACT are, typically 9 a.m. To 6 p.m. There will be some weekends where there might be some work that comes up. So, typical to any workplace, like I said, but the fellowship will have some of its own elements as well. So there will be an induction period that will happen in Delhi with the whole cohort of 6. There'll be events over the course of the year, every 2 months that the cohort will meet for. But in addition to the cohort specific events, which are around, again, giving you both the orientation to make sure you're ready to, hit the ground running when you come in, but also some capacity building, some deep immersive events to kind of, have you go on ground, see some of the work that's happening in places like rural Maharashtra. So there'll be some of those immersions throughout the 9 months. But other than that, it'll be like a full-time opportunity. You will be tagged to one vertical. So each fellow will only get to really immerse in that vertical, right? So if you're tagged to the environment vertical, you'll do everything that the environment vertical does for those 9 months. Being remote, I think, Guru, it just means that we're flexible on location that people are working from, right? So right now we have team members who are physically located in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. Those tend to be the 3 biggest hubs. But what it means is, you might be living in Pune, and that's okay, as long as you're willing to travel for meetings as and when required. And these meetings aren't just internal ACT meetings. These could be meetings with our portfolio founders, with partners that we work with, as well as for events.
And my second question is, after these 9 months of training period, and if anyone wants to set up an organization or an extension of the service of an existing startup, so how we have to apply for the grant separately, or it is like an inbuilt one? Because at that time, after the completion of the 9th month, we will be completely exposed with the team, and the team knows what we are doing. So if you can throw some idea on how it goes further.
Yeah. So, and I'd love to kind of double click on this a bit. I think Nutan has a similar question about, entrepreneurs. So look, again, we do feel that the fellowship can be extremely valuable for someone who has the entrepreneurial mindset and is looking to, and to be really honest, we just don't have enough entrepreneurs, right? So we see it as a two-way benefit. I think in the 9 months, the aspiring entrepreneurs get a deep look into what are the challenges, in my own venture, as I'm learning from other entrepreneurs, what are the things I need to solve for, right? So we think it'll be a crash course for you to really get deep information about the challenges and how to solve for them and build those enduring institutions, as well as for us, right? Because then when you do start your organization and you come to us for a grant, we also know you as a founder very deeply. So I think it's only beneficial. Having said that, our ask for those 9 months is that you are completely full-time dedicated to the fellowship and to the work of the vertical, right? Because if you're also simultaneously working on your venture and working at ACT, our fear is that you're not going to do justice to either, right? Your work at ACT will suffer. And as a founder, you're not going to be able to give full-time dedicated attention to whatever it is that you're building. So our strong recommendation is that you if you already started some work, if possible, put that on hold, dedicate yourself 9 months to it full-time. And Guru, like you said, look, the process for you to look for a grant in the future with ACT will look very similar to any other, grantee. We'll have conversation with you, an intro conversation. You'll go through the proposal process. You'll go to the investment committee. Having said that, there are inherent advantages because you'll know us and we'll know you much more deeply, right? So we can't compromise the process, but I do think the learning that happens in those 9 months will be deeply beneficial for both parties involved. If you feel you're an entrepreneur who has a venture up and going that can't be put on pause, then don't apply for the fellowship, but anyway, reach out to us and let's start having a conversation with you like we do with many of the other founders anyway. Yeah. So that's
sorry to have this extended question. Since we are working on the farming with the agriculture and aquaculture, so our nature of work will be on the field to meet the farmers. Okay, so why I have personally shown interest on this program is anyway it's going to be like a hybrid model. So in my profession or in my startup, I have to meet the farmers to create the awareness of what the technology intervention we are doing. So I think it goes hand in hand. So
yeah.
I want to have,
Yeah. Let me pause you. I just want to give other people a chance. I think your question is a lot more specific. So let's take that offline. Let's connect one-on-one and we can dive deeper into that. Saisha, go for it.
So Akanksha, how from what I've understood until now, I see this fellowship as a process to kind of increase my surface area as an aspiring entrepreneur, right? Where I kind of get to meet a lot more people who are trying to solve problems which would be similar to mine, right? I mean, problems similar to what I would want to solve for. And so I just wanted to understand, what kind of efforts will the team at the fellowship make to make sure that as fellows, we get exposure to a lot more, say, problem statements or the right kind of people, which can help us figure out things better as future entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to clarify. Thank you for that question, Saisha. I think it's really important to really, really clarify this point, right? I don't think this program is just for future aspiring entrepreneurs, right? I think this program is for someone like a Karishma who doesn't really want to be an entrepreneur, but knows that she wants to come back into the impact space. Which means she might either work for a foundation, or she might even work for an NGO. She might even work for, other impact investing firms. So one thing I want to make really clear is it's not just for entrepreneurs. It is for anyone who just has a really deep interest in the impact space and is looking for a long-term career in the impact space. But that role could vary, right? And because of that reason, we do not promise that we will make any special efforts to make sure that, we'll, ensure that you see a variety of problem statements, or we're not actually promising any of that. What we are promising is that you get to do the end-to-end work that a fund does, that either the education or the health or the environment or the Act for Women vertical does, right? In doing that day-to-day work as a grant maker, the automatic advantage is that you meet many founders, you get to see many solutions, you get to see the innovations that are happening, you get to understand how grants are made, you get to be part of our collective efforts like incubators and challenge grants, right? So it's really, I would say, a 9-month opportunity for you to leverage. Having said that, I want to be very clear that we will not be, designing this around each specific individual, because that's just not possible. Yeah, but we just think that there's such inherent advantage in you coming in and being able to get an insight into what venture philanthropy looks like.
One more question, Akanksha. Is this focused solely on India founders?
Yeah, for now, yes.
Okay.
The funds are exclusively India focused. Shrey, good question on the domain. So we will ask for you to rank order, education, health, environment, or gender. And our hope is to be able to give most people either their first or second preference. Yeah, but it will be a little bit of a mix of the vertical that you ask for, as well as, again, our own assessment of the skills that you're bringing in through the application process. Super. I know a lot of folks do have to jump off, so I'm going to quickly hit on this last slide. Application deadline is just a minute before midnight. This is 24th July. It's a Sunday. Please know that our applications are rolling. What that means is that, so folks know, we have a few applications that have already been submitted, which we're going through already. So what that means is we will go through the applicants on a rolling basis. We're not going to wait till the deadline, which again, what that means is that if we find our 6 fellows even before the 24th, then we will close the deadline and just say, look, we found them. So it does work in your favor to put in your application as soon as possible, which means that it'll get assessed as soon as it comes in. Post the application, there will also be a deeper dive interview that will happen with the panel. Yeah. Like I said, I know there might be lingering questions still, so folks can take down Ashray's email. It's ashray@actgrants.in. We will, again, this is on a best efforts basis, but for folks that still have lingering questions, we're happy to connect you with a more specific person, right? So if you have a specific question, let's say with the environment vertical, we'll connect you. We'll try our best to connect you with someone. But outside of this info session, we do think if you find it valuable, we're happy to kind of have a follow-on conversation. The application, some tips there, it's meant to take 4 hours. Be authentic, be honest. The only way to find, both value, but to really, I think for both parties to find maximum value in this partnership for those 9 months, we just think be as authentic as possible. That's the best way to put your best foot forward, and for us to really assess if this is the right fit for you. And like I said, because it's rolling, do apply as soon as possible. I'm happy to hang on for another few minutes. Like I said, we have the team here as well. But if folks do need to log off now, given we said 1 hour, feel free to do that now. Thanks, folks. Thanks, everyone. Good luck. We hope to see many of you apply. Like I said, I'll hang on in case there are more questions. Thank you, Shrey. Thank you, Tarun. Thanks, Ananya. Purushottam, did you have a question?
Can I ask a question now?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, but it was very detailed. And so myself, actually, I'm running a startup right now at Chennai. So basically for the medical level. So one of the verticals, like currently we are working for on specific problem. And later on, we realized that like there is a good vision for a company for a larger sector for next idea to be taken on. So my co-founder will be working towards the problem, like whether I can take up the full-time fellowship on the grant to look out for the more verticals on the health side.
Sorry, so I didn't catch the question, Purushottam.
Oh,
Akanksha, Purushottam, are you asking that your co-founder would be like taking up the work that your startup requires, and can you become a fellow?
yes,
Is
yes.
that your question?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, as Akanksha has already mentioned, Purushottam, like if you feel that you can, give your dedicated 9 months to the fellowship, then please feel free to apply.
Okay,
I don't
sure.
think there are any such restrictions. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think both for Purushottam and Utsav, I'll just reiterate again, if you can do this full time and during that time not be engaged with your startup at all, then yes, which means that maybe your startup is at a point where it requires a serious, model shift, and therefore it's okay for you to do that. But if your startup is already on track and doing incredible work, then come to us as a grantee and not a fellow.
Okay, okay. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.